I'm David Rogers, creative director for the Bard's Tale 4, Barrows Deep, at InXile Entertainment. So with the Bard's Tale 4 specifically, we really looked at obviously the Bard's Tale, but also really meaty dungeon crawlers like Legends of Grimrock or Might and Magic 10. Also, if you play the game, you'll sort of see notes of things like Persona 5. There's a lot of dungeon crawlers have a lot of similarities with JRPGs where you're sort of exploring the world in real time, talking to characters, getting story, but then you clash in combat. And then it goes into this really deep turn-based strategy mode. And then it also sounded like you were asking me what other games just inspire me in general, which I grew up playing Warhammer. To this day, actually. I have a D&D book downstairs in my bag because we're getting ready for a new campaign. And then also stuff like Magic the Gathering. There was all sorts of challenges, one of which is we're making a really modern dungeon crawler, and there's not a lot of examples to choose from. If we were making a shooter, for instance, we could look at Far Cry, we could look at Call of Duty, we could look at all these really modern examples and have a lot of clear patterns to go after. It's very unique. There hasn't been a game like it in a very long time, and there's not going to be one for a very long time unless we make it. And so there's a lot of new ground we had to sort of tread, and we had to figure out how you were going to manage everyone's inventories together rather than just managing one inventory. Who can wear what gear, and how do we hand out loot to an entire party full of characters and have any sense that you're going to get stuff that you actually like. These were all very interesting problems to solve. We built it on Unreal 4. And so one of our previous games was The Mage's Tale, where we used Unreal 4 to build a virtual reality dungeon crawler where you're like a wizard wielding magic in your hand and you use motion controllers to cast spells and block attacks with magic shields and stuff. And so that really kind of helped us build up that capability, and we could sort of use some of that training and some of that experience to build the dungeons in the Bard's Tale 4. We wanted to build the game first person because the original Bard's Tales were first person, and Unreal 4 is kind of one of the best games for making really visually stunning first person games. I think there's a little bit of every designer who worked on it in the game, and so we have really talented people like Russell Kruger, who's working as our lead level designer, and he's a huge Dark Souls fan. He studies those games really deeply, and so you see that come out in the level design. And the Clayton Hogston, he's really poured a lot of his sort of personality and fun-loving nature into the characters as he's sort of setting up these vignettes and telling a story. We have Joby Bednar, for instance, and he's this insane puzzle master. He built all the puzzles in the game, and sometimes we have to hold him back because he can kind of go too wild. And then we have Sean Williams leading up our combat, and he's been doing combat design for a really long time. And so between me and him, we're sort of pouring all of our passion of things like Magic the Gathering, and then he's so good at making these characters feel so alive because he's worked on so many different fighting games that the animations play out nicely and they have all these reactions. And so I think everybody has their own specialty, and they have a lot of experience in those fields, and so we're all pouring a little bit ourselves into them. And then if you've heard of Nathan Long, he's our lead writer, and just the dialogue is so funny and rich, but you really feel for these people. And he's written some of my favorite books, actually. He wrote some books for some Warhammer books, actually, that I read as a kid, and so it was really cool to work with him sort of as a kid, reading Felix and Gotrek, which is the Slayer novels, and then I get to work with them, and that was really kind of a cool experience as well. So when the game was in its Kickstarter, as they were preparing the Kickstarter, some of the leads of the game, like Brian Fargo, the legend, he co-created the original games with Michael Cranford, and so him and our VP of development and our art director and several of other people, they went out to Scotland to actually do research. So they got to go to the actual Scar Bray. They got to see the standing stones. They took photos of things and did what's called photogrammetry. And so they could take high detailed photos of objects, and we could use those to make textures for things in the game. There's even some place, I might be getting this wrong, but there's a town called, I think it's Kelly's King's Close. I think that's right. But it's just like Scarborough above and below. It's a Harmageddo, and a Harmageddo is a destroyed city that they just said, screw it, they just try it again, and they build another city on top of the old one. And so at Kelly's King's Close, again, I think that's the name, the original city is now the basement floor of the new city, and you can kind of go down there and go through the old streets, and that was a real inspiration for us as well. And then I would say like a lot of like the story and the tone and the writing and even the gameplay just comes from playing D&D a lot as a kid. Like it kind of has that tone, like there's very serious problems in the world, but everyone's having fun, like being about to die. And that's kind of like the tone we strike as you're playing this game. It's a serious game with serious consequences, but the characters are willing to joke around with another and have a little fun. Oh, well, so we did sort of. Now, The Bard's Tale being a turn-based strategy game, we would have to totally reinvent it to work in virtual reality. You'd want to see your characters on the battlefield and like pick them up by the scruff of their neck and then they drop them down and tell them to attack. It would probably feel a lot like Pokemon, you know, not do a little bit. But we built The Mage's Tale. We actually kind of had gotten a chance to do that. Like developing for VR is one of the most fun things I've gotten to do as a game designer. All of the music is wholly original for the game. And so Jed Grimes, he's been doing, he's the bassist for Simple Minds, he's so freaking talented. And he did also the scoring and worked with musicians. We wrote all the songs specifically for the game, so all the combat music is totally original. As you're playing the game, you'll like go into one of the many bars in the world, and you'll hear bards singing songs. And if you listen closely, a lot of times those songs, the ones with like full-on lyrics, will have secrets to where you could find like hidden dungeons or magic items. And because we were writing the songs as we were designing the games. By the time this video comes out, I believe we've already announced it, and it's being released this September.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. Those are actually very unique questions. I appreciate it. It's screaming in at bardstale.com.